A lot of newer players are told to start out with mid-ranges because they're forgiving and they're easy to get to go nice and straight. But it's also a good idea to have a driver in your bag so you can practice the nose-down flight and maybe see some extra distance. Here's how to choose your first driver. The first thing to look for is a slow speed. It can be tempting to go for the higher speed discs because it seems like the higher number should go farther, which it technically will, but it also requires more power. If you're not throwing a disc up to its required speed, then it's not going to get an optimal flight. There are a lot of instances where with a lower amount of power, a slower disc will actually go a lot farther than a faster disc just because it's getting up to its optimal speed. So for your first driver, it's a good idea to stay between a 6 or a 9 speed. Anything in the single digits is going to be ideal because it's still going to get you the glide and the extra distance of a driver without requiring as much power. The other thing to look for is an understable flight. Understable discs are generally easier to get to fly straight because they don't have nearly as much fade, and if you throw a faster disc but it's more overstable, it's probably not going to go as far as a slower disc that's a little bit straighter. So you're generally going to want something that has about a -1 turn and between 6 or a 9 for the speed. So some examples of discs that are great for your first driver. The first is a breakout. The breakout is actually only available in 150 or so grams. It's only available in lighter weights, and that means that you can throw it the same as a heavier disc that's slower, like a heavier mid-range or something like that, and you can get the distance without having to change your throw at all. You don't have to throw it any harder, you don't really have to throw it any different, and it's going to get that extra distance. The breakout is fairly understable, but it does have a good fade at the end for how understable and how slow it is. So if you can get it to flip up and ride a little bit to the right, it's going to pan back and finish straight, and that's going to be a maximum distance line for you on the course. If you want something that feels like a breakout and kind of has a similar flight, but maybe is a little bit heavier, the Witness is a good option. The Witness has a little bit more turn than the breakout, but it is in a heavier weight, so it flies more or less the same. It's easy to get that hyzer flip, it just doesn't quite have as much fade, so you're going to see a little bit of a straighter finish out of that. A very popular disc among a lot of our touring players is the Maverick. The Maverick is the slowest speed of the bunch. It's a 7 speed, but it has a really smooth turn. It has a -1.5 turn, which means that it's not going to be as fast of a turn. It's not going to turn as much, but if you can get this disc straight, this has hardly any fade. So it's going to go nice and straight and get you that controllable flight, an accurate flight with just a gentle fade at the end. So if you're looking for maybe not necessarily a maximum distance disc, but something that's going to give you more control at that distance, the Maverick is a great choice. And a fan favorite disc of ours for that lower arm speed shot is the Escape. The Escape is some of the easiest distance you'll be able to find. It's just got so much glide where it likes to stay in the air. It only has a -1 turn, so it's probably the most stable out of the discs that I just listed, but that means you can throw it flat and confident. You don't have to worry about starting it on a hyzer or worrying about turning it over because it's going to be able to hold that straight line, work a little bit to the right, and then have a little bit stronger fade than just about anything else to the left at the end. So if you're not used to throwing drivers, if you're more used to throwing mid-ranges, throwing a driver can be a lot different than throwing a mid. The first thing that you're going to notice is they tend to rise a lot more if you throw them nose up. Because drivers have a much more defined rim, they come to more of a point on the edge, they're a lot more sensitive to nose angle. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's good to at least have a driver in your bag as a beginner. It's going to get you used to throwing on that nose down angle and that most aerodynamic angle so that you can translate that into other discs as you improve and as you gain a little bit more arm speed. The second is they're not going to be nearly as accurate as your mid-ranges. Because drivers have a wider rim, they tend to cut more of a wider path as they fly through the air. So if you turn it over where your mid-range might only move 10 or 15 feet, the driver can move 20 or 30 feet before coming back. So it's a similar line, just scaled up side to side along with front to back. And the third is that they require more power. Like I said, speed can be seen as a distance, but it's also how much power a disc requires. So you do have to throw drivers in general a little bit harder than you would throw something like a mid-range. So if I'm not at a spot where I can throw full power, I generally will reach for a slower disc just because I know that I'll be able to get that disc up to speed, and the slower disc will actually end up going farther than the faster disc because I'm accessing the required speed for that disc. So that's how to choose your first driver. Any of the discs that I recommended, you can find them on dynamicdisc.com, and you can't go wrong with any one of them. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss other beginner-friendly content like this, and we'll see you next time.